Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you coming out to learn a little bit about red light therapy. I know most of you have, to a certain extent, heard me talk about this subject, maybe not as in depth as today, but definitely in some context or another. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh Stilborn. I'm the founder of the Recovery Spa, and one of our primary treatments here, as most of you have experienced, is light therapy. I came to light therapy through a couple of interesting avenues, one being the motorcycle accident that I'm sure you've all heard a variation of the story, and found that when it comes to research-backed efficacy in alternative therapies, there's very few out there that can hold a candle to what photobiomodulation can do. So today we're going to dive into the history and mechanism, dose, and efficacy of photobiomodulation. Just a fancy word for light therapy. The big trend right now is red light therapy. As some of you may or may not know, we don't just play with red light. We use near infrared, mid infrared, far infrared, as well as green. We'll get into all the different wavelength spectrums, dose, and I'm going to bore some of you with some technical science stuff, which will entertain some of you. And then we'll get into practical applications and so on and so forth. So the history of light therapy goes back a little bit further than I think a lot of people understand. But if you could imagine having a 1 centimeter by 1.5 centimeter piece of ruby in 1960, and then thinking, hey, you know what? I'm going to stick this next to a high voltage xenon bulb and see what happens. This guy by the name of Theodore Maiman was doing exactly that, and he created the first beam of coherent light back in 1960. Problem with that is there was no problem that his newly found coherent beam of light could solve. So for a number of years, it was just this cool thing called a laser that didn't have any problem. So it was, they called it a solution looking for a problem. Little did they know that in the coming years, this little coherent piece of light was going to change the world in multiple different ways. Everything from medicine to entertainment to how we go through the grocery store lineup has changed since Maiman found that little coherent light. Then there was a guy by the name of Ender Mester, who in 1967 was playing with a variation of Maiman's coherent light, and he was trying to treat cancer tumors on mice. What he noticed that the tumors didn't do anything, but the mice, when they were cut, healed faster, and they started growing hair much quicker. So this started a whole new field of research. Scientists started exploring the effects of red and near infrared for wound healing, pain reduction, and inflammation control. Could you imagine in the 60s and 70s, doctors trading in their stethoscopes for lightsabers? Star Wars was big back then, but it was a little far-fetched. We can't even get some doctors to think about it today, and here we are almost 65 years later, right? Into the 80s, photobiomodulation started being used in rehabilitation and sports medicine, although very rarely. Unfortunately, in the 80s and 90s, the high costs and size of light therapy equipment was just too cumbersome to be made practical. I don't know if anybody remembers the size of computers back then, but nothing like they are today, and so not practical to get into the mainstream. In the early 90s, a guy by the name of Dr. Hamlin came on the scene, and he started studying the effects of photobiomodulation on mitochondria and other cells at the molecular level. His work has literally changed the scope of photodynamic medicine and photobiomodulation in particular. You could say his work has illuminated how PBM is utilized today. 2000s set the stage for even further research and started finding benefits with neurodegenerative disease. This is when the Arndt-Schulz curve was confirmed. It was theoretical prior to, but we'll get into what exactly the Arndt-Schulz curve is. You've all heard me talk about dose when it comes to light therapy. This is the theory behind why dose is so important. We'll skip over that for now. And then, of course, if NASA gets involved during the 2000s to fund research, a lot of money gets dumped into the field and we start to see major advancements. Early 2010 is when Novathor and Arc-LED, Novathor being the gold standard in medical grade photobiomodulation therapy, and Arc-LED, they started off a little bit of a bumpy road, but they have managed to circle back to being one of the world leaders in photobiomodulation. They come onto the scene early 2010s. Then we get FDA clearance and regulatory clearance for use with musculoskeletal inflammation and so on and so forth. So again, that type of regulatory clearance gives all kinds of money coming into research and development. This is when we start to see advancements in places like Alzheimer's, PTSD, and depression, and using light therapy to help with those conditions. Of course, when you have benefits when it comes to performance and inflammation, professional sports are going to get involved. And so we see the adoption of the NFL, NBA, Marines, you name it. I've got a list about this long of professional organizations and sporting organizations throughout the world that are using one of these two devices or variations of in their recovery centers. Then we see it get adopted by biohackers and longevity enthusiasts. And you could all consider yourselves to be in that space. Whether you know what biohacking means or not, you're here. Okay. Now we're starting to see things become more widely used. Things are being adopted in ways that even when we opened the recovery spa in 2019, we didn't necessarily expect to see, but it's absolutely amazing. Just to give a little bit of context on the amount of research and effort that has gone into this field of study, there are over 700 random controlled trials proving the efficacy of photobiomodulation. There's over 7,000 publications altogether in this field, published in journals from The Lancet all the way to the Harvard Medical and every other little obscure journal that you could possibly find. So it is a highly researched field. And now we get to see the shift into PBM for cognitive enhancement and metabolic health as well. As we're starting to understand the mechanisms behind it, we're starting to see benefits in so many different places that a lot of the original research just wasn't showing initially. And it's purely because of technology advancement. So big things that we're looking at over the next little while are chronic disease, systemic inflammation. We're even seeing PBM being recommended as primary therapy for things like autoimmune disorders, like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. Long COVID is starting to come into play as well. There's a ton of research being done in that field, as well as inflammatory diseases. We're seeing primary treatment in autoimmune, systemic inflammation. Some of the advancements that we've seen since we've opened is things like resonant frequency, multi-wavelength therapy, and customizable protocols. Early on in the development, you had wavelengths of light, you had LEDs that did specific wavelengths of light or lasers, and they delivered one thing. Now with the advancements in technology, we can pulse that light, we can add multiple different wavelengths into a single device, and we can target specific tissues, organs, and systems in order to elicit the response that we're looking for. So it's a lot more customizable than Mayman's single 1x1 ruby that he probably burnt a finger off trying to make happen. If you've ever seen old videos and if you Google like original lasers, like they're 8-foot long table top with mirrors, and it just not practical for the applications that we're looking for right now. So that's the history of photobiomodulation. So I'm going to just gloss over this a little bit really quickly. The reason I wanted to bring up Dr. Hamlin is he is by far the most published researcher in the field. 64,000 citations on his work alone. He's written 26 textbooks on photodynamic therapy, photomedicine, and nanomedicine. He's won multiple awards in the photobiomodulation space. He's literally the first to win a few of these awards. The reason I bring up Dr. Hamlin is he's not only responsible for the research that backed everything that Thor Photo Medicine has developed in the last 25 years, but he's also responsible for the advancements in ARC LED's progression as a world leader in the field. This is purely to show the lineage of the devices and the companies that we decided to work with in this facility and moving forward into any expansion is because we have the knowledge base with those companies to get the best results for everybody that's walking through our doors. We're not buying stuff off a boat from China just because it happens to say it has red and near infrared lights in it and it's $60,000 less, right? Medical grade proof in the development and quality products. That's all that's coming in here. You can rest assured when you're sending your friends and family here, we're not just pulling the wool over your eyes. We're going to be delivering on the promise that the research shows. Now we're going to get into how it actually works. Does anybody have any idea of how photobiomodulation actually works? I'm going to see how many times I can say the whole word tonight without stumbling. Anybody got it? Very much. Yeah. So it hits a chromophore in our cell and it actually allows us to generate more energy. So very much like plants using UV, we can use different wavelengths of light in different ways. We're going to get into a much more detailed explanation of that. So this is for anybody who's not into the geeky science of it. You can have a nap right now. So basically, you can think of photobiomodulation or PBM as light as medicine. Every cell in the body has a power plant called a mitochondria. They produce energy and they keep us alive. PBM shines multiple wavelengths of light onto the body, boosting the mitochondrial function. So they create more energy in the way of ATP. Equals faster healing, better performance, stronger cells. So think of it as essentially lighting up and charging those little batteries in every single cell in the system. When your cells absorb this type of light, it's like flipping a switch. It activates a chain reaction inside the body that allows for small bursts of stress that we refer to as reactive oxygen species. And I'm going to get into the details of all of these things here in a second. And that just wakes up our repair mechanisms. It increases nitric oxide. Nitric oxide improves blood flow, reduces pain and inflammation, and it allows for calcium levels to shift. So helping cells talk to each other and heal faster. We're going to touch on intracellular calcium here in a bit. Just imagine PBM as a gentle spark that jumpstarts the body's natural ability to heal itself. We all know that we've got this innate ability to heal. This just kickstarts things a little bit. So it doesn't just boost the energy, it actually helps activate different gene expressions that will help tissues regenerate, new proteins, cells move and multiply, as well as the signal. So you can think of PBM as a signal for the body to start repairing itself. These are my AI cells. I feel like my generation is on point. So the mitochondria, like I mentioned earlier, this is like the powerhouse of the cell. Everybody remembers grade 10 biology, right? They're responsible for producing most of the ATP that we have in our system, is adenosine triphosphate. That is literally responsible for energy in every cell. You can think of it as a currency. The more ATP you have, the more energy you have. It's like buying services and things. If you have more money, you can buy more services and you can buy more products. So one of those things that we want more of. Then we have cytochrome C oxidase. This is the chromophore that is typically the target for red light and near infrared therapy. It's the main mechanism that the majority of the research shows time and time again is activated when it's hit with red and near infrared light. So CCO is a light-sensitive switch inside your cells. The absorption of the light that CCO results in increasing activity of the enzyme. Heightened activity is the trigger for a cascade of beneficial effects, ultimately leading to improved cellular function and healing. Reactive oxygen species is like a double-edged sword. It's a little bit of a bad rap in a way. It's true that high levels of ROS in the system can be bad and cause cellular damage. What we're looking for is a balance of ROS in the system. It does play a crucial role in cell signaling and regulation. So you can think of them as tiny little messengers that help the cells communicate and respond to their environment. The activity that PBM is putting on ROS is essentially modulating it, allowing for a balance. It's not increasing it to cause damage, and it's not decreasing it to cause less effect. It's actually helping modulate. Keeping your ROS in the optimal range is the mechanism behind what PBM does to affect it. Nitric oxide is one of the body signaling molecules, and it's naturally produced in many processes. The thing that we see with PBM and nitric oxide is it increases nitric oxide in the body, allowing for vasodilation, which is going to increase and widen blood vessels, allow for more blood flow, which allows for more nutrients, more oxygen to get throughout the system. I said I would touch on the intracellular calcium, and the reason for that is because it plays a role with the cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria, which influences various signaling pathways. Intracellular release of calcium allows for different biochemical signals that promote healing, gene expression, and cellular repair. It doesn't diminish the amount of calcium in your system. It just gets the calcium out of the cell and into the system at the right rate. So it's not a PBM, all of a sudden I have to supplement with calcium kind of thing. It's not a loss at all. So it's just a redistribution of. Key benefits. PBM offers a range of benefits for pretty much anyone and everyone. Depending on what your main goals are, we're focused on recovery, wellness, pain relief, reduced inflammation, and one of those wonderful cascading effects is the increase in collagen. For athletes, we're looking at recovery, pain relief, the athletic performance, and being just stronger and faster, as some of you have seen over a period of time of regular use. There's this increase in stamina that just goes along with it. From a vitality standpoint and overall wellness, the better your cells are functioning, the better everything is just going to flow within the system. As we age, joints and things get stiff, they get sore, collagen production gets reduced. There's a number of other processes in the body that just don't function as well anymore. By utilizing PBM as a regular treatment, we can actually increase that function and allow for those systems and things to just work a lot better. You can't have healthy joints and tissues if you don't have collagen and elastin producing at an optimal rate. PBM is an easy way to make that happen. It's non-invasive and doesn't have any side effects. This is the Arndt-Schulz curve. So I'm going to get into a little bit about dose. And the key to this graph is the kind of 3D pyramid that you're seeing down the center. And you can see as power density goes up, time is diminished. And as time goes along, you need your power density to come down. So what happened with a lot of really early research in the field is this concept wasn't well understood, and it was thought that more is better, as is a lot of things in life. More is not always better. A good balance of things is where we want to be, and this proves true with PBM therapy as well. So what we want to make sure of is that we're finding the ideal dose for the person or the issue that we're looking to resolve. Because if we don't have enough light, we're not going to get a response. And if we have too much light, we can actually inhibit any benefits or we can cause damage. So when we're talking about dosage and time in the beds or utilizing the hat or even the Kineon Move Plus, these are all devices that are dose optimized. There's power output and time, and all of them have been managed to deliver the ideal dose based on the time frame that you're utilizing. So we don't want to be causing harm and we don't want to be wasting everybody's time. That's why when people come in and they're like, what do you mean I only need to spend 15 minutes in the bed? It's because we know exactly how much power is coming out of those lights, and we know that based on the power, 15 minutes is the ideal dosage to get the outcome that we're looking for. So we have a process called a progressive adaptation protocol. So you'll start off with a short period of time, and then we'll progressively get you a higher dose. And what we typically see is there's a level of fatigue or a level of just undesired energy reduction with the patient. So then we know we've either gone overboard or we haven't gone too far. It's very individualized. Some people, like we've had people that have used Novothor for years, find 17 minutes, that's the dose. We've got other people, 20 minutes is what they're looking for. When we're dealing with athletes, high level athletes, typically shorter is better, because if we're dosing for chronic pain, we've overdosed on performance. So we want less dose for our performance athletes as opposed to for somebody suffering from fibromyalgia. We've got a 4-session protocol that will build up. So if you came in and you're an athlete and you're like, performance is my focus, we're going to stick you in at 15 minutes and that's where you're going to stay. If you come in and you say, I've just had surgery on my knee, I want to deal with inflammation and tissue regeneration, there's going to be a point where we get you up to a 20-minute dosage. And that is where we see the greatest benefit for those purposes. Once you've recovered from the surgery, if you then want to go back to a performance-based focus, we can then dial back your dosage in order to provide that. The thing with the body, it's a system. If all we do is focus on the pain point, we're not necessarily looking at the actual source of the problem, right? And that's where a lot of practitioners don't see the light of day, is they're too focused on the pain point as opposed to focusing on the body as a whole. And when we focus on the body as a whole, we get significantly better results, right? Yes, we do have some devices that focus in specific areas, but they have very specific use case scenarios. And it's not something that we're going to recommend everybody walking through the door, oh, you need a Kineon Move Plus. Well, if you don't have any knee issues or joint issues, it's probably not the thing I'm going to suggest that you take home. If you come in with a traumatic brain injury, that's not going to be where I start. We're going to probably set you up with the hat or get you into the whole body light pod, because we're dealing with soft tissue, we're dealing with cognitive impairment and other things that all need to be dealt with as a whole as opposed to in part. So that makes sense? Everybody confused by this, or did I do a good job? It makes sense? Okay, cool. Now we're going to get into the different devices that we have for those of you that haven't been in before. For those of you that have, this is going to be a little bit repetitive. I may get into some stuff that you haven't heard me talk about, but Novothor is the bed in the first room to your left. It is the gold standard for medical grade photobiomodulation. Red and near infrared light. It is the only bed that has ever had Health Canada clearance as a medical device. It's the bed that we started here with in 2019, and the reason for that is because it is the only bed with Health Canada clearance as a medical grade device. We use that as the base for all of our protocols that we've developed over the last 5.5 years, and we still have clients that prefer it over some of our more experimental advancements, which we'll get into in the next slide. These two wavelengths of light that Novothor uses, they have the largest body of research attached to them. So we know they work. Dr. Hamlin was involved in the development of this device, and we know the dose is accurate based on the timelines that we allot. We're working with a 660 and 850 nanometers, and we're putting out 17 milliwatts per centimeter squares per wavelength. This allows us to adjust the dose based on that power and your duration inside the bed. So this is where we've got that stepped approach to make sure that clients are going to react to the treatment the way we want them to. Arc LED. So when we first started in 2019, one of my first experiences in a whole body light pod was one of Arc's old beds, rickety to say the least. They have come so far in 5 years, and a big part of that was they brought Dr. Hamlin on to do and focus on all of their research and development to come out with their new ATP device. Having him on board just changed the trajectory of that company altogether. The quality of their beds have gone up, the quality of their LEDs, the quality of the treatment in general has just gone through the roof. Hence, when we decided to expand our treatment, ARC was the next step in the development of being able to offer as many different wavelengths as we can. Not only do we have the 2 red and near infrared that Novothor has, but we've also got 4 other wavelengths, including green at 523. Again, this device is dose optimized. It allows us to pulse light so we can actually get more power into the cell in a shorter period of time without creating as much heat as we would need to if it was a constant beam. I know some of you have been in arc bed and you feel like it's hot. How are we getting less heat? But trust me, if that was a full dose for that duration, you'd be melting pretty good. All of these different light frequencies happen in a single session. In the arc bed, we're dealing with a 633 and a 660 red, 810, 850 near infrared, a 940 mid infrared, and then the 520. It's 528. I got a typo on the screen, nanometer green light. The green is incredibly effective at enhancing blood quality and circulation and enhancing the body's natural healing response. So a lot of the new research is actually showing that this wavelength of green is actually more effective at tissue repair than the old combination of red and near infrared. So having all 3 wavelengths in a single treatment is just pushing the outer limit of what the research is showing us right now. So we're really grateful to be able to offer that to our clients and educate people on where we're headed with PBM in the future. So depending on the program that we're using in the arc bed is really where the dose differs. And those of you that have had multiple sessions in that bed, or if you've talked to somebody that has had multiple sessions in that bed, it's not the same experience every time. And that's because different programs will have a combination of different wavelengths at different dosage and different pulse rates. We'll be able to target specific conditions rather than just a generalized approach. It allows for a lot more focused approach in the overall therapy. Onto the Move Plus, which some of you have seen, some of you may not have. This is one of our take-home devices. And this is part of what's really cool with the advancements in PBM tech and all of the research and money that's flowing into the field right now is we're able to actually harness red and near infrared laser into a tiny little device that goes directly onto the skin. So this is what we recommend when it comes down to injury, athletes that are on the go, pre and post-surgical recovery. This is the device that we would recommend. We have a rental fleet. We actually retail it. And the combination of red LEDs and near infrared laser actually allow for this tiny little device to penetrate quite deep into the tissue and allow for repair of tendons and ligaments. So post-surgical recovery is actually really quite amazing at 15 minutes twice a day. You can do it in your living room, wear it on a plane. I had athletes from the Okanagan Sun that were like, I didn't get to sleep on the plane. These guys got to sleep on the plane because I was walking up and down the aisle, taking it off one guy's knee and putting it on another guy's shoulder. And for the whole 4 hours out to Windsor. Really effective for kind of people that travel. We're working with a couple of different wavelengths when it comes to the Move Plus, but the 808 in a laser as opposed to an LED has been proven really effective for the specific use case, which is tissue regeneration of ligaments and tendons. So super easy to use. Then we got into the light hat, the LED hat. A really close friend of mine, I would almost refer to him as a mentor. His name is Josh as well, by the name of Josh Crawford. He owns a company called Genoa Laser Therapy and Integrative Wellness out in Duncan, BC. It's the largest laser therapy clinic in the world. He's probably one of the foremost practitioners in laser therapy that you would ever come across. Some of you have had the pleasure of meeting him. He was out here a couple of weeks ago. Fascinating character. There's always tons of information coming out. He's finally gone and developed his own line of light therapy devices. This hat was 5 years in the development based on a $50,000 unit that comes from Thor Photomedicine. He was able to put 6 wavelengths of light into this device at a 30-watt power, which is incredible considering it looks like a ball cap. By September, I'm going to have long flowing locks, much to Lindsay's chagrin. Man, they'll be flying off. If that happens, they'll be flying off the shelf. I'm not going to be able to stock these things. Josh better have a good production line. So yeah, there's 5 wavelengths of light in here, varying from near infrared to red. But this is what happens when he gets some time off. He develops some pretty cool stuff. He's also got a line of mats and everything else, so we can work with him to target the whole body at home to support in between the more robust treatments that we get out of the beds. This is, I think I've touched on a couple of bits of this as we've been through the conversation. So again, treatment recommendations: acute 12 to 20. That's for injury repair, post-surgical recovery, that kind of thing. Chronic, this is fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune conditions, these kind of things. We're going to be higher up on that time frame. Frequency for those acute and chronic conditions are going to be 2 to 3 times a week, depending on your desired outcome. You want it to go a little slower, totally up to you. You want it to go quicker, we can do up to 3 times a week. Performance is going to be somewhere in that variation. Again, every client is slightly different, so we do focus on people's needs as opposed to time frame. Contraindications: cancer. We need to have a conversation with the treating oncologist. There are some cancer or integrative health clinics in the province that we work with or have relationships with that actually use Novathor in their practice. So we do get referrals through them for their cancer patients to integrate Novathor into their cancer treatments. But we will always take the lead from the oncologist as opposed to providing that type of advice. I am not a medical doctor. I do not play one on TV. This is my field, call it my field of expertise. But again, I don't know the rest of it. So that's why we defer to the professionals when it comes down to that kind of thing. Pregnancy, no exception. Photosensitive epilepsy. This is going to be something that I think everybody's aware of when it comes to epilepsy. Flashing lights can be detrimental. Hence, we don't want to stick somebody into that situation where they might end up with a seizure inside one of our beds. Aside from that, there are no contraindications. So, very powerful, limited in its scope of contraindications or side effects. And as those of you that have tried it before, you already understand it's a really good 15 to 20 minute nap. So that's it for me. Now I'm going to pass the floor to you guys. I do have one question for you through the talk. Is there anything that anybody noticed that was very similar to in regards to all of the devices that I mentioned as we're going through, similar in the way we apply it? Every device that we use has either direct to skin contact or very close to direct to skin contact. In both of the beds, you're literally laying on the LEDs. The Move Plus allows for direct to skin contact, and the hat, well, self-explanatory. The reason for that is so we can manage the dose of light accurately. I will caution anybody who's out on the internet and in maybe some other facilities, and the recommendation is, hey, there's this panel, stick it on your wall and stand 20 inches away from it. The power density of the light will diminish up to 50% at 6 inches. And another 50% by the time you get to it at the 12 inches recommended distance for most of these at-home panels. The dose that they've told you in their literature as being the benefit is no longer there, because the light photon energy is dispersed so significantly by the time it hits your skin, it can't actually penetrate to the tissue you're looking at supporting. They're out there, there's a lot of it, but they use the science to leverage their marketing. If anybody does have any questions, Lindsay's got a microphone on this handle. If you could speak into the buzzball so that we can...
This is a two-part question. First is, does standing in the bed, does it provide like tanning benefits?
There are no UV. Yeah, so there won't be any melanin activation with with either of the two beds or any of the light therapy. Most photobiomodulation doesn't utilize anything in the UV spectrum at all.
I did notice, because I've had a little bit of experience with them before, that I would come out a little bit like red.
Yeah, that might be from the vasodilation or increased circulation that you end up with a little bit of just extra color, but it's not going to be lasting. It's like getting out of a hot shower.
Okay, yeah. Got it. And second question was, do you guys have memberships?
Yeah. So we offer 4-packs, memberships, and individual sessions, depending on what your schedule is, whether a membership or a 4-pack is ideal for you. But that's how we work it. And then level of access depends on level of membership that you...
So you spoke about nitric oxide. Does it actually help in the production of nitric oxide, or does it just increase the release of nitric oxide into the system?
The release of nitric oxide. Yeah. So it's not an added production thing. It just gets more into the bloodstream. My memory serves.
Cool.
I've used the arc bed quite a few times, and there's times when I get into it, or come out of it, I should say, and I've got a ton of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time when I come out of it, I don't have quite as much energy. What's the reason for that?
So that would probably be based on the protocol that we have you on, Chris. So the way that the arc bed is designed with the multiple operating systems, we have the ability to target. So what we do typically for a lot of clients is we'll use the supersets, which is basically cleansing the system that we're focused on. And that's probably the one that you're going to feel a little tired after. And then the next session is targeting the exact same system, organ, or tissue, but we're imprinting. So that's the one where you're probably going to feel that energy boost, because we've gone in and we've targeted with more of a, instead of cleansing, we're actually boosting the system's ability to function at a higher level.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Yep. Who's next?
Hey Josh, Ben here. You chatted a little bit about ATP and the availability of it. Do you have an idea of like how to measure it, maybe pre-post a few sessions? Is there something you've been digging into that you have seen that's a way to check and measure that?
Not specifically. I feel like that would be a really cool tool to have access to. But as far as I'm aware, there's nothing out there that would allow for that in an ease of use kind of scenario. I feel like it would be more akin to testing blood lactate, where somebody's got to prick your finger and you need to get that blood analysis right away. But worth looking into for sure. To be honest with you, it hasn't really come across my radar, but now it might.
There you go. And then my other one was pattern is almost like after the fact a little bit kind of thing. How do you start the conversation of like preventative, like getting people in who sessions like this help, but maybe just starting the conversation for, oh, like this is good to do before X, Y,
Yeah,
and Z.
oddly enough, just before the talk tonight, we had a few young people in. I think they're in their early 20s, mid 20s, and the conversation kind of turned to preventative, and it really comes down to understanding what the person's lifestyle is, and maybe just suggesting things like, if you don't want to have to deal with stuff that maybe your parents are dealing with right now, a little bit of preventative maintenance goes a long way. There's an old adage, and I don't know how old it is, but if you don't, you're going to be forced to pay for your health one way or the other. You could either pay for preventative maintenance now, or you're definitely going to pay for it on the other end in the traditional medical system. The way I look at it is way more fun to do this kind of stuff and end up outside of the traditional medical system, enjoying yourself on a cruise, on a trip to Europe, or whatever else, because you're mobile, you've got energy, and you can play with your grandkids. These are the things that really drive our business and our motivation to offer these types of services to people. Because when we get guys like Roy, which I wish I had a video, he's like the poster child. He comes in one day, early 60s, can't bend over. He comes in, his knee's killing him, his hip is sore. He's pissed because he can't pick up his grandkids. And he's choked because his wife dragged him in here, kicking and screaming. And he's grumpy, and he comes in and he's supposed to get into bed. Well, 15 minutes later, he comes out and he's like, my knee doesn't hurt. And he was choked about that. A week later, he comes in and he goes, my hip hasn't hurt for a week either. I'm going for another nap. He gets in the bed again, and he comes out and he's like, I like this place. Now we see Roy once a week. He's playing with his grandkids. He can get up and down without any pain. It's changed his life. His wife, who is going to a chiropractor on a regular basis for her shoulder, couldn't get any relief from it. She dragged him in here. Keep that in mind. Wouldn't get into the bed because she's so focused on him being able to live without pain. Finally gets her into the bed after 2 weeks of dragging her back through. She comes out 15 minutes later. Her shoulder's fine. But if you can get ahead of it when you're your age, Ben, it's a lot easier by the time you get to my age, and way easier by the time you get to Dustin's age. You were just perfectly in the crosshairs. I noticed how you did duck on that. But yeah, that's really, so you either pay for it now and pay less than getting stuck in the medical system and not getting any answers anyway. So.
Yeah.
Next up.
Sorry, I got a question. So you were talking about the ATP.
Yeah.
Does that increase the actual amount of ATP, or would it increase the uptake?
Increases the amount of ATP produced in the mitochondria.
Okay.
Yeah. So more energy currency in the body.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Hi, I'm a migraine sufferer, so I've been told. What benefits would this give me?
Well, migraines are tough because they're difficult to diagnose. The source, I'm sure you're like, as a sufferer, I dealt with migraines myself. It's one of those things that most traditional practitioners are going to look for, okay, where's the pain point and what's causing it? Whereas with the approach that we use with the beds in particular, we can focus on the cognitive or the brain function, but we're also focusing on the overall inflammation in the whole system. It's a case where we're able to cover more ground with a single treatment than you would be able to with even a pharmaceutical or something like that's more targeted towards a specific mechanism or tissue or whatever they assume might be the cause of the migraine.
Mhm.
This is just a way to circumvent the guesswork and just deal with the inflammation, which 9 times out of 10, there's inflammation somewhere in the body that's causing the symptom. That makes sense?
Yep.
Hi, Josh. My name is Grant.
Hi, Grant.
Because you have different amounts of treatment for different things, has there ever been a time with your experience where people have come in, given it a shot, but haven't had any noticeable results?
Yeah, it definitely happens. Typically, we see that with people that are like come in once, maybe twice, then they're like, maybe it's not for me. We've had some people who come in twice, forget about it, then they come back 6 months later and they go, oh yeah, I noticed it quite a bit, but just life got in the way. What typically happens with clients that use the services on a regular basis and don't notice a significant tangible difference is they're the healthy ones. They're already doing a lot of things in their lives that are diminishing inflammation. They're already doing a lot of things to just keep a balanced lifestyle. And there's no drastic turn of events that we're going to be like, boom, oh, that was amazing. It's this gradual uptick, or just the baseline stays. And instead of getting older or aging the way we typically would see, you don't. And the stamina, endurance, things like that either stay where they are, or we're looking at incremental changes.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't see that drastic shift. Whereas when somebody comes in with fibromyalgia or chronic pain or something that they've been dealing with for ages, and then they hop into the bed for a purpose-built period of time, that's when we see these huge holy shit moments. But yeah, if somebody's relatively healthy, they're doing a lot of the right things to maintain that, and are looking towards a long healthy life, littler, smaller increments, and maybe in some cases subperceptual. Yeah. That's where like a test for ATP, like a pocket test or something like that, would be great, because then we would have objective measures on the outcome. So yeah.
Next.
So just 2 parts to that. So maybe a surrogate for the ATP could actually be blood glucose and blood lactate as a function of mitochondrial function. So people that have mitochondrial dysfunction tend to have higher levels of lactic acid in the blood because they can't ferry it into the mitochondria to be resynthesized back into ATP. So that's just the first thing. So we can do that. We've got blood glucometer. You monitoring yours. We just need to then take a sample of blood lactate. So we could do that. The second thing is neurological impacts of these treatments. So if people have any kind of neurological, neuromuscular issues, would this red light have an effect on that?
So there is some research suggesting that there's benefits in the neurological space. There's combinations of things that we can do to enhance that. So some supplements are photosensitive. So we can use things like curcumin as well as lion's mane mushroom. And lion's mane has significant neuroprotective abilities. And when combined with certain wavelengths of red and near infrared light, it enhances their ability to even remyelinize a nerve sheath. So that kind of combination in that specific use case would probably be really good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Speaking of vitamins, so if you're going to use the infrared bed, if you took, let's say, 500 milligrams of B3 and then get into the bed, as you said, the red light helps to...
Not all supplements are photosensitive. So like the B3 is probably just going to do what the B3 is going to do,
there's no benefit
regardless of whether you're in the bed. There are certain compounds that we know are photoreactive or photosensitive and can play a beneficial role when used in conjunction with light therapy. And those are all kind of use case dependent. I wouldn't recommend everybody all of a sudden start, if you're using the bed, start taking 500 milligrams of high test curcumin. Nor am I going to suggest that all of a sudden, just because methylene blue is photoreactive, not everybody in this room needs to all of a sudden start dosing methylene blue just because it's photosensitive. They're all very specific use cases. It would be dependent on. Anybody else? Going once? Hogan?
What's your daily and or weekly routine with everything in here? I'm just curious because if I were to optimize it,
Yeah.
I want to know what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So typically I will get down here. If I get down here early enough, I'm in the bed early in the morning.
Every day?
Not every day. No, I try to make my practice as practical as possible. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm using the bed every single day just because I have access, because it's not practical for any of our clients to be able to do that. I use the services as often as I could recommend to our clients. Do I use a variation of services every day? Yes. A typical week for me would probably look like Tuesday morning, light therapy, Tuesday evening, Normatec. Wednesday morning, biocharger, Wednesday evening, Normatec. Thursday morning, light therapy, Thursday evening, Normatec. You're seeing a trend here. Friday is really dependent on how the day goes. Sometimes I get into the light bed, sometimes I don't. But for the most part, I try to balance at least twice a week in one of the two beds. I'm in Normatec 3 to 5 times a week. And biocharger, when I get here early enough, I really like to journal with biocharger because of the way we can focus energies with it. I just find it to be very grounding, for lack of a better term. So that's my weekly protocol. There's some other things in there that I'm not going to bore you guys with at this point. But yeah, for the most part, that's where it is. 2-3 times a week in the light, almost every day with Normatec, and then biocharger as needed.
Do you do Normatec right after training?
No.
No?
Usually later in the day.
Does it matter?
Not really.
No.
If you got a heavy leg day, like if you really want to get the lactic acid flushed, the sooner the better. As long as you're inside of 24 hours, you should still be able to get a little bit of benefit. But I would argue the vasodilation and the blood flow from one of the light beds is better at that. I like Normatec for its lymphatic activation and being able to help support the body in that regard, as opposed to the athletic recovery side of things. Yeah, no worries.
Going back to more is not always better, do you mean that's like per session, or is there any evidence to support every day, doing it every day is worse for you than doing it every 3 times a week?
If you were to do it every day,
Mm-hmm.
the duration of your session would be adjusted accordingly to maximize dose. If, say, you wanted to come in and use the arc bed every single day, maximum time allotted would be 12 minutes because it will compound. With the break in between, it allows the system to reset a little bit, and then we can hit it again. But that regularity isn't necessary in most cases. So that's why we recommend 2-3 times a week as a kind of a maximum dose scenario.
I'm just wondering if some professional athletes have that in their homes and do it every day.
Yeah. And they'd probably do it 15 minutes tops. They're not going to be getting into these things 20 minutes a day. There was a period when we first opened, I was training for Ironman in 2020. And I was like, more is better. I didn't really have quite the understanding of dose that I have right now. And I was using one of our services called the nervous system reset, which I totally forgot about during your question, Hogan. I try to use the nervous system reset a minimum of 3 times a week just to keep my nervous system balanced and stress level down as much as I can. But back to this, I was doing 20-minute power naps in the Novathor bed back to back. So I was doing 40 minutes. I would do 20 minutes with the power nap. Novathor would turn off. I'd roll over, hit the button. Yeah, sorry. Power nap was the nervous system reset. I do 20 minutes, roll over, hit the button, turn it on again, have another 20-minute power nap. And then I was on a phone call with the founder of Thor Photomedicine. And I asked him, I said, hey, I'm training for Ironman. I thought this would be great. He's like, stop doing that. You're not doing yourself any favor. He said, how's your sleep? I'm like, shitty, but I thought that was because of the training. He's no, 20 minutes a day, every other day maximum, and call me next week. My sleep got better, my energy went up, and so I learned my lesson pretty early on. But you know, it's one of those things. There's nothing in this space that I haven't tested on myself to one extreme or another. So I would never ask anybody coming through those doors to do something I haven't done myself. Thank you all very much for coming down and listening to me talk for the better part of an hour and a half. I really, really appreciate it.